Steve Finley steps in at Three Rivers Stadium with the bases loaded, nobody out, and the whole game still technically pretended to be normal. It's scoreless. The Astros have Orlando Miller on third, Pete Harnisch on second as a pinch runner for Doug Drabek, and Craig Biggio at first. So the inning's already gotten weird. Drabek started the game for Houston. He used to be the guy in Pittsburgh, and he was a Cy Young winner. One of the last great Pirates before the franchise started sliding into something sadder. Now he's wearing Houston's navy and gold, standing in the batter's box against Paul Wagner, and Wagner hits him with a pitch. Drabek has to leave. Harnisch runs for him. Biggio walks, and now Steve Finley comes up. Finley had just returned from a broken bone in his right hand. He missed almost a month. He's trying to get back into the rhythm of a season that already felt strange, fragile, maybe a little haunted. Then Wagner throws him a pitch. Finley turns on it. Grand slam. 4-0 Astros. That's the game. Not mathematically or spiritually, but completely and immediately. Today's game is about Steve Finley, but it's also about the 1994 Astros being one of the strangest, almost, teams in franchise history. Excellent, dangerous, young, deep. Half a game away from first place when the music stopped. In the middle of all that, Finley gives him one clean, loud baseball moment before the season starts disappearing. Welcome back to Astro 100. This is episode 49. Steve Finley. The game is July 17th, 1994. Astros at Pittsburgh Pirates, Three Rivers Stadium. Astros win 9-0. In today's idea, sometimes a player's signature game isn't his whole resume. Sometimes it's a flashbulb. One swing that catches the player, the team, the season, and the future, all in the same frame. Steve Finley's a perfect guy for that because his career is kind of enormous, sneaky enormous. Wasn't Hall of Fame famous or household name famous, but he was enormous in the way baseball people understand it. Center field, left-handed, speed, power, triples, defense, longevity. He had the kind of career that could just keep adding up until you look at the final line and say, wait, he did all that? Yes, he did all that. But on this day, he's not yet a 5-time Gold Glove center fielder. He's not yet the World Series champion with Arizona, and he's not yet the older player running down balls in center, while everybody else's age is learning golf and complaining about their knees. He's 29 years old. He's an Astro, and he's coming back from a broken hand. In Pittsburgh, against a team managed by Jim Leyland, in a park that just hosted the All-Star Game 5 days prior, he blows open a scoreless game with one swing. So let's set the room. Houston comes in at 51-40. They're second in the new NL Central, and they're not some overachiever hanging around for a week. They're for real. Jeff Bagwell's turning the league into putty. Paste. Craig Biggio is already himself. Ken Caminiti, he's in the middle of that hard-nosed, switch-hitting third base prime. Luis Gonzalez in left. Kevin Bass, still around. Doug Drabek's on the mound. The Astros have 5 All-Stars in 1994. Bagwell, Biggio, Caminiti, Drabek, and John Hudek. That's not trivia. That tells you how the team felt in the moment. They weren't waiting for the future. The future was in uniform. Terry Collins was in his first season as a major league manager. He's intense, wiry, probably mad about something. He managed forever in the minor leagues, and this was his first big shot in the big chair. He inherited a team with enough talent to win immediately, but enough youth and weirdness that nothing was automatic. It's a good clubhouse temperature. Charged. Pittsburgh is different. Pittsburgh are 43-47 after this loss. Third in the division, but not close to the club they'd been a few years before. From 90 through 92, Pittsburgh had been one of the National League's heavyweights. Leyland in the dugout, Bonds, Bonilla, Van Slyke, Drabek, that whole machine. By 94, Barry Bonds is gone, Bobby Bonilla's gone. Drabek is literally starting this game for the other team. Andy Van Slyke, Jay Bell, still there. Carlos Garcia's an all-star, and Orlando Merced's useful. They got Lance Parrish catching, and Leyland is still managing with that face that always looks like it knows baseball's difficult and people are even worse. But the Pirates are no longer the thing. They're the afterimage. That's one of the useful textures here. This isn't Houston walking into a random road park. This is Houston walking into the old house of Drabek, with Drabek on the mound for Houston, and Steve Finley about to take the day for the Astros. Actually, wait. let's not rush past that, because if you're watching this in 1994, Drabek part might be louder than the Finley part for the first 2 innings. He's not just a veteran starter. He won the 1990 NL Cy Young Award with Pittsburgh. He's the ace of those Leland Pirates teams, and the guy you trusted when the season tightened up. He signed with Houston after 1992, had a rough season in 1993, even with a pretty decent ERA. In 1994, he looks much more like himself again. By this point, he's an all-star. So when Drabek starts at Three Rivers, that's a real subplot. The old ace came back. The old manager's across the field. The old franchise is trying to find a new shape. Drabek is cruising early. First inning, Carlos Garcia grounds to third, Jay Bell lines to short, Andy Van Slyke pops up to second. Second inning, Orlando Merced strikes out looking, Brian Hunter pops to second, Jeff King pops to second. So Drabek gives Houston 2 clean innings, and then baseball sends him to the plate in the third, and Paul Wagner hits him. And that's it for Drabek. Not because he got shelled, because the Pirates solved him. He got plunked as a hitter, and suddenly the game shifts from a Drabek story into a Steve Finley game. That's baseball. You prepare for the obvious narrative, and the sport knocks it in the hand. Okay, so let's talk about Finley. Stephen Allen Finley, born in Union City, Tennessee, grew up in Paducah, Kentucky, and played college ball at Southern Illinois. He was a physiology guy, too. That interests me. Not because every athlete with a degree becomes a biomechanical wizard, but because Finley's career does kind of read like a player who understood his body, his game, and how to keep making small adjustments for a very long time. He was drafted by Baltimore in the 13th round in 1987. Not first-round royalty, not a Golden Boy prospect. He reaches the majors with Baltimore in 1989, then becomes part of one of the great lopsided trades in Orioles history. Baltimore sends Finley, Curt Schilling, and Pete Harnisch to Houston for Glenn Davis. That trade's one of those where the sentence just gets worse the longer you stare at it. For Houston, it helped build a new core. Harnisch became a real Astro starter. Schilling did not become Schilling in Houston, but the talent was there. Finley became a fixture in center. In 1991, Finley gives Houston 170 hits, 10 triples, 34 steals, and 13 outfield assists. That's a baseball player. That's not a nice little piece. That is a center fielder putting a footprint on all parts of the game. In 1992, he plays all 162 games. So do Biggio and Bagwell. And this is where the Astros start to become the Astros team people remember from the middle and late 90s. Durable, athletic, annoying, with real players up the middle, and Bagwell becoming Bagwell at first base. Finley's not the loudest star in that group, which is maybe why he's so easy to understate. Bagwell's got the MVP arc. Biggio is a franchise icon. Caminiti is a tragic thunderstorm. Finley becomes more of a baseball traveler after Houston, which can make his Astros chapter feel like the beginning of somebody else's story. But in Houston, he was already a very good player. That 1994 got choppy. He broke the third metacarpal in his right hand after being hit by a pitch in Montreal on June 8th. He goes on the DL June 13th and doesn't return until July 3rd. So by July 17th, he's been back for 2 weeks. It's not just a random home run. This is a player who had his hand broken, came back into a pennant race, and then produced the biggest swing in an 8-run inning. And because baseball likes foreshadowing, Finley will be traded to San Diego after the season in that massive December deal. Finley, Caminiti, Andujar Cedeno, Roberto Pediguin, Brian Williams, and Sean Fesh. Houston gets Derek Bell, Doug Brocail, Ricky Gutierrez, Phil Plantier, Craig Shipley, and Pedro A. Martinez. Not that Pedro Martinez, different Pedro Martinez. It's important you know that. Finley goes to San Diego, wins a Gold Glove, becomes an All-Star, helps the Padres reach the 1998 World Series, and then goes to Arizona and wins the 2001 World Series. Later on, he hits a walk-off grand slam for the Dodgers to clinch the National League West in 2004. So this Astros game is not the summit of Steve Finley's career. It's more like a flare. You see the player clearly for a second. The timing of this game is loaded. 5 days earlier, the All-Star game was played in this same building, Three River Stadium. The National League beat the American League 8-7 in 10 frames. Fred McGriff hit a dramatic game-tying homer in the 9th, then Tony Gwynn scored the winner in the 10th on a Moises Alou double. That's the national baseball stage. Then the regular season resumes. Houston's still in Pittsburgh, so the park itself has this leftover Midsummer Classic charge. Same building, different crowd. No pageantry now, just the long second half beginning. Except it's not really going to be a long second half. That's the ghost over every 1994 game after the break. The strike hasn't happened yet, but the season's already carrying that feeling. Labor troubles in the air. Everybody knows something bad's coming. Nobody knows exactly how much is going to get taken away. What gets taken away is a lot. Tony Gwynn's run at 400. Matt Williams chasing Roger Maris. The Expos having the best record in baseball. The Yankees looking like themselves again after years outside the postseason. And for Houston, maybe the best Astros season since 1986, getting cut off half a game behind Cincinnati. Bagwell wins the MVP, and he deserves it. He's absurd. But even that gets frozen, in a strange way, because his hand gets broken right before the strike. The season ends before anybody can catch him, before the Astros can figure out what they actually were. That's why this July 17th game matters. It's not late enough to be a pennant race classic. It's not October, not even August. But in 1994, mid-July is closer to the end than anybody wanted to admit. Managers first. Terry Collins for Houston. First-year MLB manager. Intense. Direct. Not cuddly. Eventually, he becomes better known nationally for managing the Mets to the 2015 World Series. But in 1994, he's just getting his first major league shot with a Houston team that can win right now. Jim Leyland for Pittsburgh. Already one of the great managers of his era. And now, from our seat in the future, a Hall of Famer. Leyland had taken the Pirates to 3 straight division titles from 1990 through 92. Still there in 94, but the roster's changed around him. Starting pitchers, Doug Drabek, Paul Wagner. Drabek, as we said, is the heavyweight name. 1990 Cy Young, former Pirate ace, now an Astros All-Star. He throws 2 hitless innings before the HBP ends his day. Wagner is a younger Pirates right-hander. Good arm, uneven results. On this day, he gets in trouble early. Then the 3rd inning becomes a mess he can't escape. His final line is 2 innings, 4 hits, 5 earned runs, 2 walks, 2 hit batters, and the Finley homer. The Hall of Fame position player matchup is on the Houston side. Bagwell at first, Biggio at second. And that's the center of the Astros franchise identity for a long time. In 1994, they're not legacy acts yet. They're in the middle of becoming legendary. Bagwell enters this game hitting .354. He leaves it with another RBI, another run, and another little piece of a season that ends with one of the loudest stat lines in Astros history. Biggio leads off, gets 2 hits, walks once, scores twice, and is involved in the first inning's weird little base running note. He singles and gets caught stealing while Finley's at bat. For Pittsburgh, the future Hall of Fame presence is Leyland in the dugout. Not a Cooperstown player in the lineup, but there's real names there. Van Slyke, Bell, Garcia, Merced, Parrish. It's not an empty team. It's just not the old monster anymore. Now the game itself. First inning, Biggio singles to center on a full count. Good start. Then during Finley's at-bat, Biggio gets thrown out trying to steal second. Finley grounds out. Bagwell singles. Caminiti grounds out. It's a very baseball first inning. It looks promising, then it turns into nothing. Drabek handles the Pirates in order. Second inning, Kevin Bass walks with 1 out, but Wagner picks him off before Orlando Miller can finish the at-bat. Again, Houston gets a man on, then gives him back. Service had popped out. The inning dies. Drabek sets Pittsburgh down again. So after 2 innings, it's scoreless. Houston's had base runners, but no runs. Pittsburgh has done nothing. Then the 3rd inning arrives. Orlando Miller leads off with a single to right. Miller's interesting here because he's barely into his major league career. He just debuted in early July. He's already flashing this kind of, hey, maybe there's something here, energy. In this game, he has 3 hits, drives in 2, and hits his very first triple. Then Drabek gets drilled by a pitch. That's our first turn. Pete Harnish comes in to run. Biggio walks, bases loaded, nobody out. Finley comes up. Wagner gets ahead, or at least he got strike 1. Then Finley hits it out to right. Grand slam. Houston leads 4-0. And this is where the game stops being a rally and becomes a collapse. Bagwell gets hit by a pitch. Wagner gets pulled. Rich Robertson comes in. Caminiti flies out. Luis Gonzalez walks. Bagwell steals third, because he used to steal a lot, remember? Kevin Bass gets intentionally walked. Bases loaded again. Scott Service doubles to left. Bagwell scores, Gonzalez scores, Bass goes to third. 6-0. Orlando Miller, batting for the second time in the inning, triples to center. Bass scores, Service scores. 8-0. Mike Felder pinch hits for Drabek and grounds out. Biggio grounds out. The inning finally ends. 8 runs, 1 inning. The Astros turned a scoreless game into a blowout before Pittsburgh really entered the conversation. This is where I want to correct myself a little, because when a game has an 8-run inning, it's easy to treat everything after that like paperwork. Some of it is. Nobody's pretending the 7th inning of an 8-0 game is high opera, but Shane Reynolds deserves more than the guy who protected the lead. Reynolds enters in the third because Drabek can't continue. That could be an annoying spot. A starter leaves after 2, then the bullpen has to cover 7. Even with an 8-run lead, that can get stupid if the long man starts leaking. Reynolds doesn't leak. He throws 7 shutout innings. 5 hits, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. 88 pitches. Not bad. He wins the game and basically gives the rest of the bullpen the afternoon off. That matters because blowouts can cost you pitchers. This one doesn't. Reynolds gives Houston length, calm, and a shutout. That's professional. That's useful. That's the kind of thing a good team gets on a day when the original plan breaks. This is also why the Astros feel dangerous in 1994. It's not just Bagwell launching baseballs into low orbit. It's not just Biggio setting the table. There's depth, there's athleticism, there's secondary guys doing real work. Finley blows it open. Miller adds the triple. Service drives in 2. Reynolds takes 7 innings and turns the game into a sealed envelope. That's a team win. Finley's the lens, but the team around him tells you why Houston's in the race. After the third, the scoreboard mostly settles down. Houston goes quietly in the 4th and 5th. Pittsburgh finally gets something in the 4th. Van Slyke singles, Merced singles, 2 men on. But Brian Hunter pops out to Service, and Jeff King grounds out to Bagwell. That's as close as Pittsburgh gets to making the game breathe again. In the 5th, Reynolds sets him down. In the 6th, Orlando Miller gets another hit. Reynolds lays down a sacrifice. Biggio moves Miller to third with a grounder. But Finley grounds out and the score stays 8-0. In the 7th, Caminiti singles but no damage. Reynolds keeps rolling. In the 8th, Lance Parrish walks, Dave Clark grounds into a double play, and that's it. Then the 9th gives Finley one more touch. Biggio singles to left, Finley doubles to right, Biggio goes to third. Bagwell hits a sac fly, Biggio scores, and Finley moves to third. 9-0. Caminiti strikes out, and Houston's day at the plate is done. I guess that's all right. Bottom of the 9th, Pittsburgh gets a Carlos Garcia single. Jay Bell flies to Finley in center field. Van Slyke strikes out. Merced infield singles. Then Brian Hunter flies to left. Game over. Astros 9, Pittsburgh 0. Finley's line, 2 hits, including a double and a grand slam. 4 RBI, 1 run. Orlando Miller has 3 hits, 2 RBI. Biggio, 2 hits, a walk, 2 runs. Reynolds, 7 scoreless. That's a clean road beating. Steve Finley's one of those players who exposes how bad casual baseball memory can be. Because if you say, Steve Finley, a lot of fans nod politely. Solid center fielder, all that's true. But it's also underselling him, almost comically. This man finished with 2,548 hits, 304 home runs, 320 stolen bases, 449 doubles, and 124 triples. That's not a nice career. That's a borderline Hall of Famer. It's a baseball life with a ridiculous amount of accumulation. Sometimes accumulation gets treated like a lesser achievement, which is stupid. Being good for 3 years is hard. Being useful for 10 years is hard. Being a center fielder into your late 30s, I'd say that's really hard. But being productive enough to keep getting run out there across 8 organizations for 19 years, it's not an accident. Teams don't hand out 9,387 at-bats because you have a pleasant face. Finley was a power speed defense player before every team was trying to engineer one in a lab. He led the National League in triples twice. He won 5 Gold Gloves, 2 All-Star teams. He played in 7 postseasons. He won a ring. He hit one of the most dramatic division-clinching homers you can hit, a walk-off grand slam for the Dodgers in 2004. He still lives in that category of players who feel strangely under-remembered. That makes me think about how much of baseball fame depends on where your best years land, whether you stay with one team, and whether your teams become part of some national mythology. If your name has a clean story attached to it. Bagwell and Biggio stayed in Houston and became statues in memory. Caminiti became a tragedy and a warning. Finley moved through baseball and kept being good. It's harder to brand, but I'd say it's not less impressive. This July 17th game in Houston, it's a snapshot of that. He's not the whole story in 1994. He's not the biggest star on the roster. But when the moment arrives, he does the thing that changes the day. Sometimes that's the job. For the Astros, this win moves them to 52-40 and keeps them in that National League Central fight. It also starts a ridiculous little run of violence around the Pirates. The next day, July 18th, Houston goes home and pulls off the greatest comeback in Astrodome history, coming back from 11-0 against the Cardinals to win 15-12. Later that week, the Pirates come to the Dome, and Houston beats them 11-0 on July 23rd, with Bagwell going wild. Then 13-1 on July 24th, with Bagwell and Biggio doing even more damage. So this 9-0 game's not an isolated occurrence. It's part of a stretch where the Astros look like they just might start swallowing teams. For Pittsburgh, this loss is another marker in the post-Bonds, post-Drabek, post-division title fade. They finished the shortened season 53-61, third in the Central. Leland is still there. The organization still has recognizable players, but the shape's different now. The Pirates had been the model of early 90s National League contention. By 94, they're becoming a warning about how fast a window can close when talent leaves, and the replacement wave isn't enough. For Finley personally, this is a return statement. Broken hand in June, back in July. Grand Slam at Pittsburgh. Second career Grand Slam, his first as an Astro. He only plays 94 games in the strike-shortened, injury-interrupted season. But this is one of the days that jumps off the page. It also lands near the end of his Astros career. By late December, he's a Padre. That trade changes a lot. It sends Caminiti and Finley both to San Diego, where they become central to the Padres' rise. Brings Derek Bell back to Houston, and Bell becomes a big part of the next Astros phase. So it's not a nothing trade. Houston gets value, but Finley becomes one of those guys where you look back later and say, man, they had him too? Yeah, they had him too. The Astros finished 66-49, half a game behind Cincinnati. The strike shuts down everything on August 12th. The postseason, canceled. The World Series, canceled. That sentence still pisses me off. I didn't watch baseball for a year after that, because there was no baseball for a year after that. For Houston, it freezes a team that deserved an ending. Maybe they win the division. Maybe the wild card gives them another out. Maybe they don't make it at all. Maybe Bagwell's broken hand changes everything if the season continues. Maybe the staff runs out of gas. Maybe Cincinnati holds them off. I don't know. That's the point. The 1994 Astros are permanently unfinished. That unfinished quality gives a game like this a little extra weight because you can't go to October. You can't point to the playoff series. You can't say, this was the step that led to that. Because there is no that. There are only regular season flashes. Bagwell's monster games, Biggio's table setting, Drabek's rebound, Hudek's all-star weirdness, Finley's grand slam in Pittsburgh. For Pittsburgh, the strike ends a losing season early, and maybe that feels less tragic to them. But it's still another year of drift after the glory years. Leland stays a little longer, then eventually leaves. The Pirates' long losing era is not fully written yet, but the opening chapters are on the desk. Finley's career after Houston's the part that makes this episode feel bigger than the Astros' box score. In San Diego, he wins his first Gold Glove in 1995. He becomes an All-Star in 97 and helps the Padres to the World Series in 98. Then Arizona, more power, more Gold Gloves, another All-Star appearance in 2000. World Series championship in 01 against the Yankees in one of the great World Series ever played. Then the Dodgers, 2004, where he hits that walk-off grand slam to clinch the NL West. Later still, he's in center field at 41 years old. That's deranged. Respectfully deranged. Center fielder is not where teams hide old guys. That's where fly balls go to test your remaining dignity. Finley lasted out there. He ends with more than 2,500 hits, 300 homers, 300 steals, more than 100 triples. That has everything in it. Contact, power, speed, gap power, longevity, legs, hands, time. For Astro 100, the point is not to pretend this was all Houston's achievement. It wasn't. The point is to remember that Houston had a real piece of that player's story. Not a cameo. 4 seasons. Productive, formative seasons. The center fielder on a team becoming good again. This game lets us catch him right before the next version of his career starts. So what's Steve Finley's Astros story? It's not future star passes through town. That's too thin. Steve Finley was one of the athletic pillars of the Astros' early 90s rise. He gave them center field defense, speed, triples, hits, enough power to punish a mistake. He played besides Bagwell and Biggio before the franchise identity hardened into a legend. In '94, after a broken hand interrupted his season, he came back and hit a grand slam that turned a scoreless game into a rout. That swing didn't save the season. Nothing could. But it gave that unfinished Astros team one more loud, clean day. Honestly, that's enough for episode 49. A player doesn't have to represent everything. Sometimes he just has to step in with the bases loaded and make the story obvious. Next up, we go back to Warrior 100 for episode 25, Jim Barnett. April 13th, 1973. This one is fun. Before Jim Barnett became the familiar Warriors broadcaster, he was the guy scoring 26 points while Golden State knocked Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the Milwaukee Bucks out of the playoffs. That's not a small sentence. Warriors over Bucks, Game 6, Western Conference semifinals. Rick Barry's there, Nate Thurman's there, Kareem's on the other side, and Barnett's the scoring leader in the closeout game. So next time we're talking about a broadcaster before he was a broadcaster, a playoff upset before it settled into franchise lore, and a Warriors team that looked at Kareem and said, yeah, we're going to keep playing. That's Astro 49, Steve Finley, July 17th, 1994. Astros 9, Padres nothing. A grand slam, an 8-run third, and one more bright piece from a season baseball never let finish. Thanks for watching. Stay kind, keep moving.